Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining the Rocky Metal Guardian today. Hope you're doing well wherever you may find yourselves. I'm Dane, your host. I recently posted a video about the possibility that Rush may reunite, and in that video I discussed how I believe, in my opinion, Neil Peart is irreplaceable. And so it got me thinking there are a lot more band members in my estimation who I believe, in my opinion, who are irreplaceable. So that's what I would like to talk with you. That's what I would like to talk to you about today. And before we get into that debate, I do need to preface it with a little Greek philosophy, and this won't take long. And this Greek philosophical topic is called the ship of Theseus, also pronounced Theseus or Theseus. He is the demigod who is the strongest of the Greeks, second only to Heracles or Hercules, his cousin. And so the ship of Theseus, also known as Theseus's paradox, is a thought experiment that raises the question of whether an object that has had all of its components replaced remains fundamentally the same object. And so using this as a metaphor for bands who replace their members. So if we talk about if all the planks are being replaced, what comes to mind with me is Foreigner, because you have no original members. Once in a while, Mick Jones will come out, right? And an example where one of the planks is replaced would be Motley Crue with Mick Mars being replaced by John Five. So either way or in between can be applied to this paradox. It doesn't have to be all the planks. It could be one or more or several, but not all of them. But it can be all of them as well. And this also makes me think of the Disney franchise, Herbie the Love Bug. You have a car that is not an inanimate object, but a persona. It's a living being, and so in those funny movies, the car races in these tournaments, and its door would come off. There would be an accident, and you have to replace a window or a tail light or a trunk or what have you, and yet the car would infuse it as part of his personality. So that's what is tied to all this, that band, that ship metaphor for these bands, in other words. So let's start with Deep Purple. And I was never against Ritchie Blackmore being replaced. After all, Coverdale replaced Ian Gillan. Excuse me. In addition to that, I was okay, I should say, with Ritchie Blackmore being replaced with Tommy Bolin, because I'm quite fond of the Come Taste the Band album. However, having said that, I think Deep Purple stopped being Deep Purple when Steve Morse joined the band. And it's also for other reasons, because of Ian Gillan's voice isn't what it was and that sort of thing. But regardless, there are people out there, and I respect their opinion. I just disagree with it. It's my opinion. I disagree when there's those people out there who say that, Steve Morse is in the band for 20-something years. Well, that logic doesn't fly with me. I think it's poor logic, because just because someone's in a band for 1 year, 2, 4, 7, 13, 20, whatever, doesn't mean they're a good fit for you personally. It may be a great fit for you, but for me, it just doesn't work. I've gone back into that discography so many times, the Steve Morse era, and still nothing resonates with me. And as much as I want to like it, I just have to admit defeat and move on. So the example of Deep Purple is one that fits both categories for me. Again, this is all my opinion. Nothing I'm saying here trying to espouse as fact. It's not. It's just my opinion. So Deep Purple is an example of how, at one point, replacing members, we can still call the band Deep Purple, but at some point you have to stop, because it's just too far removed from what the sound is and that sort of thing. Another example is Uriah Heep, same as Deep Purple. I found the Lawton eras to be quite good and keep the name, but when you get to the Bernie Shaw eras, again, not so much for me. I've tried to love this. This is just not. I like the one before this, Living the Dream, but most of the Bernie Shaw era just does not resonate with me for some reason. So at some point in this video, I meant to lead with this as well. I'm going to explain why I believe these band members are irreplaceable, or why some band members in general are irreplaceable. So now let's talk about examples where replacements worked. David Gilmour, Pink Floyd. Phil Collins, Genesis, at least up to a point. Dio and Black Sabbath. David Coverdale, as I said, in Deep Purple. Bruce Dickinson and Iron Maiden. Paul Tonka Chapman, and UFO. There are others, of course, but I don't want to exhaust and do a big whole laundry list of things, and we'll be here all day, right? So what I believe is that band members who are replaced and then deserve to keep the name, those examples are rare or close to rare, if whatever the word for that is. Anyway, now, here's the biggest problem. Not just one person being replaced, like in the Mick Mars example, but the Foreigner problem, or close to the Foreigner problem, where you have kind of the Uriah Heep with the Bernie Shaw era, where you have constantly changing lineups or constantly rotating lineups. This is like a band doing musical chairs with its members. This is the bands. This is what I call, or many people have called rather, that these are where bands are a band in name only. Excuse me. So one more time. Sorry. This is where we have bands who are bands in name only. Here are some examples of that: Whitesnake, Dio, Foreigner, as I mentioned, Jethro Tull. Let me talk about Judas Priest for a minute. They don't quite fit this category, but partially they do, in recent years anyway. So if we talk about firepower for a minute, for me personally, again, there's not much for me to love. I like 4 songs out of 14 on here. And I'll explain again why later certain band members are irreplaceable. And if we talk about the new Judas Priest songs, a new one came out, Trial by Fire, but I'll get to that one in a second. But we talk about Panic Attack. I like the kind of keyboard intro, and I like the guitars, but I cannot stand the chorus. The chorus ruins it for me. You get Panic Attack, dun dun, Panic Attack, dun dun. It sounds like a jingle for a board game commercial. I envision, 2 kids playing a board game in a commercial, and the object is to not have your enemy surround you, but once you're surrounded, you go into panic attack mode, and you have to do this to get out of it. So panic attack, dun dun, panic attack. So it's terrible, if you ask me. And again, I'm in a minority here. And now, as far as the new song goes, Trial by Fire makes me think of Journey, but that's not the problem. The problem is that it's a cliched title, and I don't like Rob Halford's phrasing in the song whatsoever. Anyway, so Judas Priest kind of fits this category of constantly changing lineups, or at least in recent years. All right. Not the best example, but I'm including it. So I mentioned Foreigner, I mentioned Dio, Whitesnake, Jethro Tull, Black Sabbath post the Dio years. So we talk about the Seventh Star album as an example. This is a big example because this is like so many instances. Same thing with Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson, Tony Iommi. They wanted to put out a solo album, but the record company says, no, you have to put it out as a band with the band name. Again, band in name only, because it's band as brand, because it sells. The name of the band as a brand is what sells. So it's a marketing tactic. It's a sales tactic, because it's what the audience is going to want. Because audiences won't, when history shows, audiences don't buy something from a solo artist as much as if it's given the band name. All right. Next, as an example, though this is an artist, not a band, but splitting hairs, Ozzy Osbourne. UFO post Paul Tonka Chapman era. This one is huge. This is probably the best example after Foreigner. The Dead Daisies. Constantly rotating singers and, another solo artist, but Yngwie Malmsteen. Will Pantera be next? So let's talk about artists that are irreplaceable now. I'm going to save the big 3 for last. So I mentioned Ozzy Osbourne. So Randy Rhoads. Never the same, if you ask me after that. I talked about Yngwie Malmsteen. So once Jeff Scott Soto leaves and Mark Bowles, never the same again. Those 2 guys had the voice for that band. And then just for me personally, never the same. Once Dio leaves Rainbow, Keith Moon Even in his own biography, Roger Daltrey points out that he believed, in his opinion, that Kenny Jones wasn't the right fit, and he explains why, and I agree with him. Chris DeGarmo and Jeff Tate of Queensryche, never the same after they left. Here's probably the biggest one when it comes to guitar players. Eddie Van Halen. This whole reunion thing with, I don't think Hager, Anthony Satriani, and I forget the drummer now, Chad Smith, I can't remember, are going to call this Van Halen. Anyway, so, and that's good. Pete Willis of Def Leppard. Joey Belladonna of Anthrax. Once Bush came in as lead singer, especially on the We've Come For You All album, sounds like Pantera. I like it. It's not Anthrax. Fleetwood Mac. Peter Green, Jeremy Spencer, and Danny Kerwin. The pop era of Fleetwood Mac to me, and even the Bob Welch era of Fleetwood Mac to me, is not Fleetwood Mac. Again, just my opinion. Mark Bolan of T-Rex. Can you imagine replacing him? Lemmy Kilmister. Ace Frehley. These are all irreplaceable, in my opinion. Here's some more. Ann and Nancy Wilson. Can you imagine a Heart without those two? Steve Hackett of Genesis. Steve Harris of Iron Maiden. George Lynch of Dokken. I don't like any of the Dokken. Try as I might, I don't like anything by Dokken post George Lynch. Now, here are the big three. I've never heard a single person champion or pro champion, to stick to that word. I've never heard one person champion. Let's have Beatles without Lennon, or the Beatles without Harrison, or both. Although you have that new song, but to me, that's not the Beatles. Shame on Yoko, in my opinion, for giving McCartney and Ringo that demo. Leave well enough alone. Led Zeppelin. Now, Led Zeppelin did reunite with Jason on drums, but they didn't put new music out. So if you want to reunite for a tribute, or in an anniversary, or some momentous occasion, well, great. But okay, that would be an exception. And of course, Rush. I talked about Neil in that other video. Can you even imagine replacing Geddy? Can you even imagine replacing Alex? I can't. And speaking of Rush, and beyond Rush, engineers and producers in many ways are irreplaceable. Terry Brown comes to mind. Bob Ezrin, Martin Birch, Fleming Rasmussen, that's Metallica and Justice for All. So it begs the question, why? Why, in my humble opinion, are these people irreplaceable? The first one is chemistry. There's something to be said about chemistry. So, for example, when it comes to chemistry, this has no chemistry. Again, I'm just saying opinion-wise, this has no chemistry to me. No chemistry. No chemistry. No chemistry. Mick Box is the only person left in the band from the original band. All right. Next is synergy. Let me go ahead and define that for you. I have to look it up every time. I know what it is, but it's hard to describe, so I'm going to go ahead and define it. The interaction or cooperation of two or more elements, substances, or other agents, in this case people, musicians, artists, to produce a combined effect which is greater than the sum of their separate parts. This is what we call magic. That's magical era of the band, right? We call it heart, we call it character, we call it soul. The late great comedian George Carlin once pointed out that if you call everyone special, then special loses its meaning. So many artists, in my estimation, are irreplaceable because they're special. They're legendary, whatever word you want to use. Okay? So, and then we tied into chemistry and synergy, as I mentioned, producers and engineers, is production. When you have a new guitarist, you have a new singer, that throws a monkey wrench in how you're going to produce things, or it can, and that will throw off chemistry, synergy, etc. So, copying or tracing, usually 90% of the time, is not as good as the original. Another reason why so many band members are irreplaceable is because, as I said, they're special. And yet so many people want to equate new members or replacements on equal footing with people who have legendary status as musicians. Okay? That's what we call recency bias. And the biggest recency bias example would be in sports, people arguing that LeBron James is greater or better than Michael Jordan. Just because someone's new on the scene doesn't mean they're always better or are better. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying musicians should stop playing, but don't use your band name as a brand. It's dishonest. It's pandering. It dishonors those unique talents, those legends, those magical, those special talents, those giants who once walked or still walk the face of the earth. People are called legends for a reason. They're called special for a reason because they're irreplaceable. Come up with a new band name. Think of it this way. Whether a band or artist, we're talking about some shouldn't be replaced. You wouldn't replace Hendrix in the Jimi Hendrix Experience. You wouldn't replace Miles Davis. You wouldn't replace David Bowie. Now, this sounds like a hyperbole or stretch. No, I'm being serious here. Replacing a legend like Neil Peart, John Bonham, John Lennon, etc., to me is the same as trying to replace Bowie in his own band, Miles Davis in his own band, Hendrix in his own band, etc., to me. Yet, Alice Cooper and David Coverdale would have you believe, because they have both said that their legacy will continue without them. Kiss too. Paul and Gene have said that as well. Their legacy will continue once they retire. Alice Cooper, Kiss, Coverdale, etc. As far as I'm concerned, the legacy stops with them once they retire. No Alice Cooper? No. No Coverdale? It's just band as brand. Thanks for watching. Take care.